Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christine Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
Hello and welcome everyone. We have a special guest today, a longtime friend of mine, Joel Webrink, is going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about the difference between leadership, management, and coaching. And Joel's going to share his insight and share what he's been through over the years. Welcome to today's podcast, Joel.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
So we're going to do a little bit of introduction. Joel is the owner of Webrink Landscape Management in Warsaw, Indiana, and he's just going to give us a little bit about how long he's been in business, what's the size of his company, what are the services that he provides.
Well, as Steve mentioned, my name is Joel Webrink. I am the owner. I started the company in 1997, about 18 months out of college. So we're in our 27th season. We are a three-ring circus. We are a design, build, maintenance, irrigation, lawn fertilization, mosquito control, and snow company located in the northern part of Indiana. We are about 25 minutes south of the Michigan state line, due center of the state, east to west between Chicago and the Ohio state line. We employ roughly 25 people. We're just over $2.5 million business. Our market is small. I live in an area with 101 natural lakes. So it's a bit of a resort community. During the summer months, like right now, all the Lakers are coming back to their second homes, and they'll summer up here from all over the country. And then sometime in September and October, they head back to their wintertime residence.
Nice. So, I mean, you've got a lot of seasons under your belt. You've seen a lot of changes in the landscape industry, a lot of changes in your business. You know, pretty much right out of college, you kind of started your business. You went through some of the growing pains like we all do, that we all need to go through. And over the years, you've grown your business to over $2.5 million. And so today we're going to talk about a discussion you and I were having on a phone call about the difference between leadership and management and even coaching. So share your insights on that, or some things that you've learned over the years or have seen.
Well, I think as a small business, you do go through a lot of growing pains. And, when I came out of the field, we all look for, I think, leaders. We want somebody that's going to replace us. Unfortunately, nobody ever replaces the owner. The way owners think, we're different. We're very unique. We're very fast paced. We make decisions typically a lot faster than anybody else in the company. And I think we have this misconception that we're actually going to kind of plug and play just a little bit. And the one thing I've learned since I've been out of the field, well over 23, 24 years now, is you never do replace yourself. I think as I started to move out of the field, I thought I was replacing myself with leaders, and actually they were managers, more of kind of people that are checklist people. You give them a list and they'll go down the checklist and get it done.
So, and we had these conversations before, so we'll bring everybody up to speed. We talked about leaders have more of the kind of the bigger vision, that the purpose that's driving the company, and the managers are the kind of like the tactic people. They're implementing tactics, where leaders are implementing the long-term strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that what you're finding with your managers?
Yes. Yeah. Managers are very tactical. Once you've kind of assessed the market, assessed where it is you want to go in the next year and a half, and you put together the list of things that need to be accomplished. Yeah, managers are very good at accomplishing those tasks. The problem that we've run into is there's been a bit of a gap. We're kind of at this pubescent period where I want to begin to further reduce the dependency on me in the business day to day. So therefore, I need somebody that can lead people, that can take the vision and integrate that into the business and kind of translate it into a list of tasks that then get accomplished by the managers. And that's our gap currently.
Okay. So, I'm really big into Clifton Strengths and Gallup Clifton Strengths, like so much that I became a certified Gallup Clifton Strength coach. And one of the things that, we've noticed on our team is that one person can't be everything to everybody. So we're really developing teams or a leadership team, and that combines different multiple strengths to form that team that produces the list of things to do. So because we tried to put that on one person and it was a fail. They're too much of an integrator, too much, they have their strengths lined up, but they really, sometimes people look like they either are lazy, they don't care, they're procrastinating. But really what happens is their strength gas tank is empty. So it's really who's on your team and who else can come support that 20% that we don't have. Even myself, I'm not a super detailed person. I'm a starter. I'm not the middle. I'm the starter, and then I want to see the reports. So even for my own team, I need people that can do that, the heavy lifting middle part. So with your management team or that gap, what are two things that you really need from the person to fill that gap?
Well, I think you said it best, Steve. You and I have known each other for over 2 decades and have become very close professionally and very close personally. And you and I are wired very, very similar. I've been told by my staff and by my wife and by friends that, I'm a 40% guy. I am awesome in the first 40%. The last 60%, I fail miserably. And I can get to 50 and I might be able to get to 60 if I keep my nose down. But the back half, the 40% to get to completion, yeah, forget about it. And I've been that way since I was a kid. Guys like you and I, we always have to kind of have a challenge out in front of us. We got to have goals. We have to have things that we work towards and things that keep us kind of entertained and occupied, or we do stupid stuff really, really fast. So, but what, kind of back to your question, what do I need? I need somebody that can pick up where I leave off, that kind of understands when I hit the 35% mark to know that he's only got about 5% left in his gas tank and he's going to run out pretty quick and he's going to move on to the next idea, the next thing in the market, the next, whatever it is to stay out ahead of the business. I draw on I've got 16 feet of dry erase board in my office because I'm very visual, and I write on that, and that's how I think. And is I have to write it out. And when I bring somebody new in, especially if I'm trying to kind of get them coached into a manager role, is I write the past, the present, and the future, and I kind of make a timeline. And I draw on there. This is where I work best. I work best in the future and a little bit in the present. And then I need somebody to manage kind of where I begin to pass that baton from future to present. That's where I need a strong person with good leadership skills. I think in our size business, we need somebody that can perform tasks, but can also see kind of down the road and around the corner just a little bit. They don't have to see all the way down the road and around the corner, but they got to be able to kind of see what's coming up in the next 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. Steve, just like where you live, we know that winter shows up every year. And we know that spring shows up every year. But for some people, it's like the first time ever that winter or spring show up. And that's a great big surprise for some reason. But we're approaching the end of May. We have a big hurdle of Memorial Day weekend where we live in the lake area, and we're gonna get past that. And then once we kind of get into June and into July, we actually got to start thinking about wintertime just a little bit. What accounts do we have, and who's going to help us through the snow season so that we don't wind up understaffed in the event that we get a heavy winter. So I think that's what I need right now. And I think companies at our size, anywhere from about, $1.5 million to probably 4 million, they need that person that can see down the road and around the corner just a little bit, lead people in the direction, not pull them and not push them, but lead them. And then also be able to manage people that manage the tasks.
Mm-hmm. So, I think we've referred to them affectionately in the past as middle managers, but really we need is middle leaders, right? And that's a whole different mindset, because if managers are managing tasks or the getting the stuff done, right? How do we manage, or how do we develop leaders that have a little bit of that vision, that 90, 186 month or a year out, right? Because winter's coming, whether we're ready or not. That's one of my sayings, right? Next year's coming, 2025 is coming, whether we're ready for or not. So how do we develop the skills for people? How do we lay that out? And this is where I think as leaders, this is where we switch from even our leadership role into a coach role. And so how do we coach people to think like leaders, to act like leaders, and how do we give them the tools? And one of the things that we focus on quite a bit is mindset, right? So that curiosity, that learner mindset. And we're big fans of the choice map and staying curious instead of always having the answers. What's best to do now, what's possible, what do I want, what do they want, and how do we get there? And then really laying out for them, and this is kind of the big picture of that 5 years. And I always like the 5 years is 1,825 days. So how do we lay that out in the seasonality and get people ready for that? And they love systems. Most of the people love systems. So you have your 90-day goals that you work on, my team work on, our 6-month goals, our 1-year goals. And so that helps them at least focus in on what the goal is, and then they can start breaking the tactics down. But what do you think? Like, what would the mindset look like to you for that leader that you're talking about?
I think it's your word curiosity. I think the person has to be curious. I think they have to want to grow themselves, but there's probably a slightly higher percentage of them wanting to see other people grow. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career. I get more fulfillment out of watching somebody else do something better than I ever could, compared to me coming up with the latest and greatest idea. I get a lot of fulfillment out of that. So to answer your question, I think they have to be curious, they have to want to grow themselves, but they also have to be very passionate about helping others and watching them grow in their career and expand their skill sets. And it's not necessarily in the field, it's mostly out of the field with just thinking. The ability to think is huge. And I think a lot of contractors, and we have fallen victim to this when we were young, a lot younger, is we like to be the guy with all the answers because it makes us look super smart. And I think as we enter, I'm in the third quarter of my career, and you're a little bit ahead of me there, but
well said.
But I want to be the dumbest guy in the business, and I want to actually contribute the least every single day. But the contributions I make, you don't really see a return on that investment for 12, 18, 36, 48 months. And then I think you become a pretty good leader and a good coach at that point.
So kind of what you're talking about, long-term 36 months, right? That's, 3 years. So it sounds like you're talking kind of about a learning culture or a leadership culture, or having places for people to learn and grow. And I also liked what you said about developing other people, right? Because leaders pass themselves. They don't have that 4-foot view. They're looking much longer, much wider, and they're looking at developing people. So I'm curious, and we did not do it for years. And when I say for years, I'm talking like 28 years. Our whole philosophy was work or be fired. And it changed in 2018 to safe and supported. And we started developing, a culture of curiosity, learning. And in a really short period of time, in about 2 years, I was able to work myself about 80% out of my business just by shifting my own. It started with my own mindset, right? There's a Sicilian saying, the fish stinks from the head down. So, the leader, the owner, that's where it starts. So it had to start with my mindset and learner and the curiosity. And then we started building that through the company. And we were able to do it pretty quickly. And then we learned, okay, that this didn't work. Let's go back and try that again. And, we had a kind of rosy glasses after the first like 18 to 36 months. And then we had to fix it and realign it. So what are some of the things that you're doing in your company now that are kind of giving that the upcoming leaders an opportunity?
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier about mindset. Mindset is huge. As you know, I was a college swimmer, and I had one of the nation's best sprint coaches, Coach Bill Powell. And I always remembered him saying, "The body achieves what the mind believes." And that's in the pool. And I always believed that I could do well. I did. Excuse me. I had a really, really good collegiate swimming career, but the body does achieve what the mind believes. So now to answer your question, what am I doing? I've had to make some hard decisions in the past year and a half. But some of the things we're doing is we are empowering our management team. Unfortunately, some people really love it and some people don't. So it does cause a bit of a shift in mindset and in personnel. But I'm not a micromanager at all. I don't enjoy it. I don't like getting crazy involved in what everybody's doing and how they're doing it. I encourage mistakes. Go ahead and make them. They'll make mistakes that cost us hundreds. I'll make the ones that cost us tens of thousands. And I've done that in 27 years, and I know you have as well. In fact,
yes, I have.
Each other, a couple of them. But just kind of be a good leader, be supportive, like you said, create a safe environment. We don't. It's not a dictatorship around here. It's open, and we do rely on each other. Probably over rely on each other from time to time, but we've got a really good team in place right now. Some people are new to the company, and they're still trying to figure out our industry, figure out their role within our business, and their role within their department, how they can support each other. But communication is huge, as you know. I mean, we've talked about that, since you and I met over 21 years ago. Is communication is key, and you can't have these walls of communication or barriers within your business, because even though we have different services and people kind of work in different areas, everybody has to, at the end of the day, support each other. And I'm a firm believer in that. And
yeah, it's support is a big part of it. And it did change the culture of my company, when we switched from that worker be fired, and I came back saying, okay, this is it. Like, we're going to have a safe and supported workplace. And I didn't know what that really meant, but I knew it meant, curiosity. And I didn't have all the tactical parts figured out, but we do now. We have, different courses and classes that people can attend, and to create that curiosity, and leaning into the Clifton strengths more really helped. And even until last year, I'm a big fan of the 4-week vacation. I take one every year. And we've talked about this many times. When the owner goes on vacation, even if it's for a week, the cracks come out, right? The rotten apples show up in the company. The person who's embezzling gets discovered. The person who's really not a team player and who is even sabotaging the company comes out. And you've had that experience. I've had that experience. We've had it multiple times. So taking that 4-week vacation really shows the cracks. And, one of the challenges that we had in my company were that people were associating the role with the behavior. So they were like, well, this role means this person behaves like this. The challenge was their strengths didn't match up to the role for the behavior part. They could do the job. Their strengths matched up to the job role, but not the behavior role. So people were going in for the hugs to the wrong people, and they were going to the support for the wrong people. So once we got everyone to understand, no, this is the person. When you need a pat on the back, go to them. When you need a hug, you go to this person. But when you're on the side of the road and you got a flat tire and you got a truck full of processed gravel and the skid steer in the back, this is the person to call. So once people really understood that, that's when the safe and support level really rose up in our culture.
Yeah, and it's been fun to watch your business, change. You and I talk a lot, and you're very, very progressive in everything that you've done and everything that you do. So it's been an interesting journey to watch you from afar.
But what, you and I have gone through a lot of this together. We've had many conversations. The embezzlement, you were one of the first people I called because you had been through it. I went through it, and if anybody thinks they have not been through it, they've been through it. You might have just not caught them. Or right. Or maybe you did. Somebody's either stealing.
Yeah, I still have the Maker's Mark painting that you had made for me. It sits in my office. I see it every single day.
That's awesome. Yeah. Joe was there. I had a situation of some investment that I discovered, and Joe was very supportive and helpful, both emotionally, gave me some great business advice around that time. But, people are either stealing material, time, the phone now is a big issue, watching videos and being on the phone. That's kind of a form of embezzlement. So anyways, it's tough. So let's just say if you were going to coach someone they're just starting up in business, maybe they're in their second year, maybe they have 1 or 2 employees, what kind of coaching would you give them?
Well, the first thing I'm telling them is, get more than one mentor and coach in your life. When you're starting out in business, as you and I know, it's not easy. You work a lot. You're starting a lot of things all at once. You're starting a business. You probably have started a marriage, probably starting a family. I started in business the same year I got married. Don't recommend that, but we are still married after almost 27 years. So my wife is very, very patient, as is your wife, because I have spent time with her.
Very patient. She just reminded me this morning of actually how patient she is.
Mine will remind me later today, I'm sure. But surround yourself with good people and mentors, a business coach, a personal coach. Just make sure you've surrounded yourself with the people that you want to become, because you will rise to that.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
The second piece of advice to any small business owner is, and we learned this early in our career, Steve, is you got to know your numbers. You have to. I learned the hard way. What forced me to really get a handle on my business was an embezzlement. We were a very small company. We didn't have a lot of money. We were going into winter, and we discovered a pretty good size embezzlement. In mid to late November, I'd already bought some property, was trying to build the shop and facility that we're in now. And that added stress going into winter was just, it was a bit to deal with. However, I wouldn't change it for anything because it forced me to change the way that I think. I got dialed in with my numbers. I got really good coaching right after that. In fact, Steve, that's when you and I first met in 22 years ago. It was right after I discovered my embezzlement.
Yeah, and that was a really tough time. I think you had to call the law in. I mean, it was a big deal. Yeah, good advice. Hang out with people or get to know people that are where you want to go or have a growth mindset. Get multiple mentors. That definitely helped, getting different viewpoints because there's a lot to learn. And knowing your numbers, right? Know your numbers. That's huge because business, even when you know your numbers, business is challenging, right? So not knowing your numbers is triple challenging. Being able to, like, you and I would not be where we are today in business if we had not gone through that coaching and mentoring and knowing our numbers, um, for a fact. So knowing your numbers is crucial. Working with someone that can help you report those numbers quarterly, annually, and track those to make sure that the goals are moving you toward the direction that you want. Because we've both knew our numbers, but still that we've run into hurdles, bottlenecks, challenges. But I think even though we ran into those challenges, we kept moving forward because we knew our numbers. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Even though you encounter these challenges, at least you know that the challenge is there. And really, it's just a formidable opponent that you have to get around. And the having you in my life and in my business, and hopefully vice versa, you've coached me a lot. I know I've coached you on occasion, and we have several other people that you can come into my business and you see the fingerprints of all those people. And the same in yours. I've been to your business, you've been to my business and my house, and you see your fingerprints in and on my company.
Oh, absolutely. Joel visited my business. I still remember when you were here, the very job we were doing that day, because I was still out in the field, working, selling. I visited Joel's business. Going on business visits are huge. I've done over 45. I've had 50 people visit me now. And right, you see the fingerprints, one or two good things of what to do and what not to do. It's worth every visit. I have 12 pumpkin plant strategists coming to visit my business in June. They're going to spend a whole day here, so that would be neat to see and get their feedback. They're going to do the tour. They're going to do the whole thing, and then give me some and feedback and learn about how we develop our people, our leadership, and our culture. No, you have been very helpful in some dark times in my business, Joel. And also, very helpful, or it's great to call up and share when things are going really well, and share with someone that's happy for your success, and not like I never had to, oh, we won, and like I never felt like I was bragging or you took it like that. I just wanted to share that. It's really good to have a friend to share your successes and wins with that are happy for you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, your friendship has meant a lot to me over the past 2+ decades, and forever grateful for that. I know it'll last to you until neither of us are here.
That's right. Yeah. And being in business and being friends is a special place. It's a special friendship, because your friends who aren't in business and don't have a business don't get it. They don't get the pressure and all the responsibility that we carry. Like, the buck stops with us. There's no boss behind us. And that's a lot of pressure.
Our only safety net, Steve, has been each other.
Right.
And because we understand each other, we are able to provide good personal and good professional advice, because we do have such a deep, intimate relationship with each other.
Oh, absolutely right. And we know each other's families and businesses, so it's legit advice. And there's nowhere to hide with bullshit and chest pounding and truck counting, and matter of fact, I don't even know if most of the time we're not even doing that, truck counting or anything. So, well, I want to go back to a little bit about the management and coaching. So I know we both have had frustrations over the years of like getting the lead, or how do we give, and I don't have an answer for this, but like one of the things I found out was I had to give people permission to lead.
Yeah.
Because no one else in their life had ever done that.
So I use the phrase, I'm giving you the authority. And I use that with my foreman. I use it with my office staff, my managers. I will tell them I'm giving you the authority. And most of the time it's to hold me accountable to getting either something done, again, because it falls out of the first 40%. But I think giving somebody the authority to do their job or to own a responsibility You kind of mentioned mindset and advice. I'm going to kind of back up a little bit. I think as an owner, you also have to figure out, where do you add the most value? What's your personality like? Where are your strengths? And it may not be, you might be the owner, and you can own the company, but maybe you're not the best guy to lead it. Maybe you're wired to be more of a manager, and you like some of the day-to-day detail. You like looking down the road, but don't like to look around the corner. Hire somebody that is good at that can stay out ahead of the business, if that's what you want your business to do, is to continue to grow and prosper and provide opportunity for people.
So you give them the authority to lead. And how do they take that?
It kind of, it's a bit circumstantial. So if I give somebody the authority to hold me accountable, their eyes get real big real quick. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually the boss of the boss, and really I'm not the boss of anybody. I'm kind of the boss of me, and that's it. They need to run the company day to day, and they need to manage people. We also developed about 3 or 4 years ago a thing called a KRA, and it's called a key results area. And what it is at the top of the document, it's a brief 2 to 3 sentences overview of what the role is. Then it gets into expectations. This is what is expected. And it'll list a lot of those responsibilities. Some of them are defined, and some of them are not defined very clear. They're a little bit gray and broad. Then at the very bottom, it describes, this is how you'll know you've been successful. So you fast forward a year, this is what success looks like in this role. And when I spent months developing these KRAs for every role in the business, from me as the owner all the way down to kind of the craftsman level on installer maintenance crew. So, and that kind of parallels a career path as well. So these two documents kind of work in tandem. So when somebody comes into the business, they'll know where they can go. But the KRA has been helpful. I've had several of my managers say that they pull those out weekly if they ever feel like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. They'll pull that out, and it kind of gives them, gets them refocused and gets them moving in a direction again.
So you're creating an expectation, so they're clear on what the company expects from that role.
Yes. However, it's not down to every single detail. Again, we're kind of back to the ability to think. You and I think at the stratosphere level. We think way high and way far out, and a lot of managers in down, they kind of think about today. They can't see the forest for the trees sometimes, and we can't see either because we're too far away most of the time. So I think a good leader and a good manager really understands what that middle part looks like. They're able to kind of go up and down. Go down to the ground level, but they can't stay there. They got to come back up to the canopy of the trees and get up 1,000 feet. But also understand that the Steve Bousquets and the Joel Webrinks of the world they're way up at 10,000 feet and beyond, trying to go even further.
Right. So a good manager, even leader, right, needs to know that it's not linear, right? It's non-linear. There's a term, non-linear dynamic chaos, which I love. And it's just like, right, just when you think you have something figured out, it moves, right? And then another challenge comes up. So not only is it non-linear, not only is it dynamic, but also is chaotic. And you're not really moving really forward in a completely new direction or a new level until it feels a bit chaotic.
Yeah. So at church yesterday, actually the term horizontal came up. It's not vertical. It's not horizontal. It's horizontal.
That's funny. Yeah. And understanding that. And I think, it's interesting because that's where when I watch my leaders and managers grow from manager into leader, is they're like, okay, things are not like A, B, C, D forever, every single time, all the time. And my team members that really struggle to move past that kind of technician role, they're very curious, but they don't see past the doing part of their role. They have a challenge with seeing how it affects the entirety of their department, the entirety of the company, or even the community. Where my leaders and managers are seeing like, oh, if I do this, it contributes to our mission and our community because it's a part of a really solid or big building block and piece of that. So I've been working with people, my company who struggle. And really what I see is they come from the people that I'm referring to come from really corporate jobs. They came from really either like you are a cog in the wheel. Don't think, you just show up, do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it, how I tell you to do it. And they've been trained for 15 years, and untraining that, unwinding that is quite becoming a challenge.
Yeah, and in contracting, we live in an area that's heavy in corporate. We're the orthopedic capital of the world, and what we have found is that people that have worked in orthopedics, they don't do well in contracting businesses. They don't do well in our company because they have been trained to stay in a lane and follow a process. And again, don't think they're the cog. They're just a step in moving information through the business where we deal with weather, we deal with breakdowns. We're always dealing with something every single day, and they just can't adapt and move and pivot quickly. I think good leaders can pivot quickly. I think good leaders understand that we are going to have these challenges. This is typically when they're going to present themselves. I don't know exactly who or what it's going to be, but I know what's going to happen. Springtime is a prime example. We live in northern Indiana. Every year in a multi-service business, and Steve, you know this, one of our services takes it on the chin. It's either fertilization, it's maintenance, it's install, it's mowing, even though we don't mow, thank goodness. But this year we have had so much rain that the guys that cut grass for a living in our area are anywhere from 11 to 14 days behind. So you can imagine what lawns look like in our area and the phone calls that those guys are getting. Last year it was irrigation. We had a drought in April and May. That never happens in northern Indiana. And we had clients screaming, my yard is dying, my yard is dying. Like, well, we haven't even been to your house yet to turn it on. So, you have to be patient. Good leaders kind of see a trend and know that something's going to happen in the spring. What's it going to be? And how can I get out ahead of it long before it ever shows up? Because every year it's something.
Yeah, you're right. Every year it's something. It might be two somethings, but it's coming, right? And I know it gets very frustrating for people. And, one of the things now that I'm doing even more business coaching is younger people or people that are newer in this industry are really shocked and surprised how hard it is. And I asked them, well, who told you it was going to be easier? And they're like, well, nobody. And I'm like, so you just thought it was going to be easier? Because, especially if they worked for another landscape business, they only saw what they saw the owner do. They didn't see the payroll. They didn't see the insurance. They didn't see the attorneys. They didn't see, you're guaranteeing all of the loan payments, right? They didn't see the hiring. They didn't see the firing. They didn't see the, late nights, the Sundays. So when they get their own business, they're like, I had no idea it was going to be this hard. And they complain about how hard it is. And then I have to really coach them around, it's hard. It's a different hard, right? The numbers get bigger, more money, more problems. The responsibilities get bigger. There's one responsibility when you can't get to those lawns and those customers are screaming at you because you can't cut the grass, right? But it's another responsibility when you have 25 employees that are paying mortgages and car payments and have kids, so it's being in business is hard. So if you're new in business for even 5-10 years, it's hard, and it's always going to be something.
Yeah, it is. It was hard when we were young to dig a hole with a shovel. And then it got hard to finance the machine that's going to dig the hole. And then it got hard to find the guy that's going to run the machine that digs the hole. Then it's hard to find the guy that's going to manage the crew, and so on and so on. Yeah, everything is hard. Things get easier because you delegate, and then you're able to elevate beyond some of those things. You delegate the digging of the hole. You delegate the management of the crew from yourself coming out of the field to a crew lead. And then, you delegate the middle management role. But I think delegating the leadership role in a business, if that's where the business wants to go, is a lot more difficult than delegating to a manager.
Yes, I don't. Delegating leadership is. I've seen it really destroy businesses, or they abdicate leadership. Right? You can delegate it, but you can't abdicate leadership to other people. You can, one of the Dancing Man video leadership video is one of my favorite. Where you basically you have they have the leader, and you have the first follower and the second follower, and the leader shows the first and second follower how to lead. I mean, how to follow him. And then their job is to show the third, fourth, and fifth follower how to follow them. So, and then it continues down there. So building your first follower and second follower are crucial, but they're following what the leader does. So,
and as owners,
absolutely, you can.
And as owners, and you and I being the leaders of our company, we've never gotten it right 100% of the time. And if you have good people around you, I'll let my people, let my staff fail. I encourage it. I think it has to be reciprocated as well, because you and I don't have a playbook. We write a new one every single day that we're in business. We do rely on each other. You're a bigger company, you've been in business a little bit longer, so you become a little bit of my crystal ball to look into the future. And as you and I, both know, we have a lot of those people in our lives. However, it's not for certain. And we still have to we have to fight our own fight. We have to lead like we know. And, but we're not perfect people. And we have to surround ourselves with people that are going to allow us to be imperfect and allow us to get it wrong so that we can get it right.
Absolutely. So if they're looking for the perfect leader, we're never going to be that. Yep. We're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. It's part of our immutable laws. Making mistakes is acceptable, and it's a two-way street. And that's why we need to lean on each other in those times. It's challenging. COVID was a whole nother set of leadership challenges that none of us had been through. So having really solid foundational leadership concepts and culture in your business really help those companies survive and actually, come out of COVID even stronger, better teams, better businesses.
Yeah. And I think also, as you build a leadership team or a management team, not everybody has to know exactly what's going on all the time, but you can't have a big gap between, say, the owner and the field. I think, the whole kind of back to rowing in the same direction. Everybody kind of needs to always row in the same direction, not exactly at the exact same speed, but if everybody's rowing in the same direction, that's when serious momentum can be gained. I think a good leader in the middle is really good at kind of translating where the owner wants to go, where the owner sees the market and the business going. Because really the business is only going to go where the market says it can go, unless you change markets. Our market here where we are is saying we want more of you. And if you can provide the people in the field to do it and the leadership to manage it, we will reward you appropriately with a bigger business. But you have to have somebody in the middle that is good at really translating all of that information, understanding it from the top down, and being able to translate it down into the middle manager role and then onto the foreman and crew level role, so that they know what their responsibilities are, what contributions they're making, and how it impacts the day, the week, the month, and the year.
Yeah. It's a challenge. We're always working on it. You're always working on it. And I think we're better at it now than ever before, but we've definitely had to learn our lessons.
Oh yeah, they're painful.
All right, Joel. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us on today's podcast. Is there any parting words of wisdom, maybe a saying or quote that you'd like to share that you're fond of?
Oh, I would just like to express my gratitude to you for the friendship, personally and professionally. But, I value that probably deeper than I could ever express. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. I look forward to the next chapters of our personal and professional lives. Appreciate the opportunity. We do talk a lot, and we always enjoy each other's presence. We've taken some vacations together, And I've always enjoyed being around you and just value your friendship. So thank you, Steve. You're doing a tremendous job. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for everything that you've done, everything you continue to do. You're a huge inspiration to me.
Well, thank you, Joel. It means a lot. And, it's how I feel about you and your family and what we've been together over the years and how instrumental you've been in my business. Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on today's podcast. And we look forward to you joining us on the next podcast. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast.
The show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.